We recognized early on the power of ingredient branding. We did not want to be commoditized. So in working with a material such as natural rubber, it's known to be a commodity. But by adding value to that material and value to the messaging and helping people understand your industry, you can elevate that material from a commodity status to something more specialized. So with a brand like Patagonia, we recognize that if we could get Patagonia to co-brand Yulex and to tell the Yulex story, that it would actually be good for both brands. It'd be good for Patagonia and Yulex.
Welcome to Hero Inside, the Ingredient Branding Podcast with Tomas Vucurevic. In each episode, Tomas will draw from his vast experience as the go-to global ingredient branding expert and will discuss this subject with visionaries and pioneers in the field. How do you go from the zero position as a supplier of a new ingredient to the hero position in demand around the world? Let's find out.
Welcome back to the Hero Inside Ingredient Brand Podcast. Today, we start our second season in which we want to focus more on innovative tech ingredient brands. My name is Tomas Vucurevic. I'm the founder and managing director of Brand and the host of this podcast. Again, a big thank you to our listeners for your continued loyalty and welcome back. Today, I'm excited to welcome Liz Bui, CEO of Yulex LLC, and Jeff Martin, the visionary founder of the company. Liz brings over 20 years of experience in biotechnology and pharmaceuticals and is leading the company into its next development phase. Jeff is a recognized leader in the natural rubber industry, known for the pioneering sustainable solutions he developed. Yulex is a leading ingredient brand specializing in the production of high-performance plant-based alternatives to synthetic materials like neoprene. Their products are made from responsibly sourced natural rubber, primarily from certified deforestation-free plantations in Vietnam. Yulex partners with smallholder farmers to create a sustainable supply chain that benefits both people and the planet, providing eco-friendly materials for industries ranging from wetsuits to bags, accessories, and automotive. So let's dive in. Okay, Liz, Jeff, it's a pleasure to have you here, especially in a time when you are making such monumental steps on the journey of the Yulex brand, but we will talk about that a little bit later. Maybe we can start at the beginning. Jeff, you as the founder and the founding CEO, can you take us back to the time when you had the idea of starting a business with an alternative natural rubber?
Yeah, Thomas. Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak about this. So, yeah, that goes back quite a few years. Our first look at alternative sources of natural rubber, we're working with a crop called YULI. Because right now, all the natural rubber in the world comes from one species of plant, which is the Brazilian rubber tree. And so we were looking for other sustainable alternative sources of natural rubber that we can use to replace petroleum-based rubber. And that was the Yuli plant, which was actually a desert shrub that can be grown in the United States, which makes commercial quantities of natural rubber. And just very briefly, we ended up developing that material and launched a product with Patagonia, which was really the start of this journey.
And I think we are in an era where still most consumers aren't aware of how harmful neoprene is to people and the environment. Do you need to do a lot of education in that direction?
Yes, absolutely. So education is a big part of what we do. With respect to, if you were to look at our website, Dr. Bui has made sure that there's plenty of information on all subjects, and in particular on neoprene, which is one of the first products that we developed an alternative to replace. So the issues are not only surrounding the carbon footprint of neoprene, as it is with all other plastics and synthetic rubber, but the issues surrounding the safety of the material, especially with respect to the chloroprene emissions at the plants where they're manufactured, and the incidence of cancer in the areas surrounding the production of that material.
So your whole brand has this very a pragmatic and responsible big picture DNA, as you call it. How do you cultivate such a culture that is that can remain very dedicated and be passionate about your vision and principles? And what is that big vision of Yulex?
So at Yulex, we've always we keep it simple, and the mission and the vision has always been the same, which is we develop bio-based, plant-based products to replace petroleum-based product equivalents. So Yulex foam to replace neoprene foam, YULASTIC filaments to replace spandex. So there's a theme here. And we just keep to that core. I think there are a lot of cool innovations to pursue and challenges and problems that need good solutions, but we have a mission. And that single mission of replacing common petroleum-based products serves us well. And it's clear what we do, and our messaging is clear on what our expertise is. So replacing petroleum products with plant-based, bio-based products where we can.
Excellent achievement. So let's move on, Liz, maybe with a question around your supply chain model, as you are also here very hands-on with your supply chain and your partners. You are deeply committed to ethical manufacturing, having that very close relationships, and you always emphasize that the backbone of your supply chain are the what you call smallholder farmers in Vietnam and Thailand. So what inspired you to start working with these smallholders? And then from there, how do you control that the whole production process down the chain remains sustainable?
Right. Thank you for that. So, Thomas, I think what's really interesting is that, before I spent nearly 20 years in the biotech and pharmaceutical industry, and mostly for the most part as an attorney, as an intellectual property attorney, business development, licensing. And so when Viasite, my former employer, got acquired and I switched over to biopolymers, different technology, different skill set, not necessarily different skill set, but just a different sort of industry. And so for me, actually, creating the supply chain from scratch, if you will, was my way of learning this industry. And you don't learn it until you actually do it. And so I've always, it's one thing to read about it, it's one thing to have calls. And this was during the pandemic, during the whole, and it's hard to develop a supply chain with smallholders who've probably never been on a Zoom or a Teams call. And so the only way we really could do that well, and to do it in a way which was authentic, and that we actually got to know our supply chain on an intimate level and connected with people, was to actually move to Southeast Asia to do the work. And that's what we did. So for over 2 years, we moved to predominantly in Ho Chi Minh City, but different areas of Vietnam, and connected with people on the ground who actually helped us. And so we went all around Vietnam and Thailand, talking to smallholders, talking about sustainability, and really understanding what that really means to be a smallholder, to be a household whereby you have about 1.5 hectares in your backyard, and that's how you make your living, right? You may not have access to modern equipment. You don't have access to infrastructure. You don't even have access to basically lenders and that type of capital. You don't maybe have the wherewithal to understand regulatory changes such as EUDR, legal, local, and national sort of changes, let alone like intricacies of, deforestation. And so there were a lot of things that smallholders, that farming sort of economy has not changed for over 100 years. They still use one tool to tap a tree, and it's the same tool they've used probably for 100 years in this industry. So not much has changed. Additionally, with regards to the inequity of value and where profits are derived in supply chains, you are aware that the closer you get to the brand and the retailers, the more money and the more margins you make. So that only means that there's a dilution of that as you go further towards the actual source of the raw material, which then, of course, is your primary producer, which in Vietnam and Thailand is almost 50 to 90% smallholder. And so I think starting from there, helping form cooperatives, linkages to, our processors, and then, working with them and working with everyone really. But I think for us, it's really the authenticity of meeting everyone along the supply chain, giving them value, and truly understanding their pain points. And that doesn't happen unless you continually just keep on visiting them throughout the different aspects of when we start our development. So we did it in the beginning. Then we started making our components, and we had to go back and, and figure out like, okay, is this working for you? How do we best work with you? And it's all about questions and asking questions. And you have to stay unbelievably curious, because no matter how many times I visit the same manufacturer, the same smallholder, the same processor, I get new information based on the questions I asked, and just based on live in-person conversation. And so I think that's just how it's helped me to learn the industry, coming from a totally different industry and a background.
Amazing. I think we could just on that topic continue the podcast until we finish in about 20 minutes. But a lot to learn, I think, for our listeners and also for other ingredient brands, starting with the commitment of the CEO and the founder to move along the supply chain to the source of the material and to live there 2 years. I'm not sure how many CEOs have done that. Jeff, I want to go back to the mentioning of Patagonia, because their endorsement at the early days was arguably one of the biggest wins for the establishment of Yulex as an ingredient brand. What would you say is the role of branding for Yulex, and how does following the ingredient brand model benefits you as a company?
Yeah, Thomas, very good question. So, we recognized early on the power of ingredient branding. We did not want to be commoditized. So, in working with a material such as natural rubber, it's known to be a commodity. But by adding value to that material and value to the messaging and helping people understand your industry, you can elevate that material from a commodity status to something more specialized. So, with a brand like Patagonia, we recognize that if we could get Patagonia to co-brand Yulex and to tell the Yulex story, that it would actually be good for both brands. It'd be good for Patagonia and Yulex. The issue was with Patagonia, they'd never used another brand on their products. The closest they'd have ever come would be using a hang tag for, say, Gore-Tex. But we had a very innovative breakthrough technology, and it was disruptive to the industry, and especially as we were looking at wetsuits. So after a year of arm twisting and wrangling and negotiating, we finally got Patagonia to agree with the CEO. Her name was Rose Marcario, who was CEO at the time, finally agreed to brand Yulex on their wetsuits. And we're very proud of that, as they do today. So it is known as the Patagonia Yulex wetsuit. And frankly, that was our first ingredient branding success. And from there, it was transformative for the company, because Patagonia is just known as a leader with respect to sustainability and basically walking their talk. And they are the quintessential business model for industry. So we recognize that with their endorsement, with ingredient branding, it would mean a lot for us going forward. And it has.
Yeah, I will continue on that in a moment. Just one side comment as you were talking about natural fibers. I'm not sure if you are probably aware, but many of our audience maybe not, but there's literally almost all natural fibers are unbranded and because of that commoditized, while most of the synthetic fibers are branded. And that, in my opinion, also plays an important role on the success. Jeff, one more iteration of that question, because working then with many other brands, different brand partners, always brings up that question of positioning, right? So I was also very impressed early this year with the work that you are doing with Decathlon. And I also think the thinking in the market around what is premium and what is not premium in the sustainability range needs to change um, from the old days where, premium was only defined by price points. But we can see today that also large retailers like Walmart or Whole Foods are very sustainable, while maybe others who are selling at higher price points are not so sustainable. But Decathlon is the largest sports retailer in the world. I know they're growing very fast. Now you have a cooperation with them. How do you balance that with, let's say, premium brand partners like Patagonia or Finisterre?
So let me just briefly comment about branding for natural materials versus synthetic materials. Absolutely true. We're well aware of that. So we are the first branded natural rubber company in the world. So there's never been a brand. So we decided to create a brand surrounding natural rubber. So when we came out with the Yulex technology to replace neoprene, it was not intended to be a price premium. Because keep in mind, when one of the things that most people don't know, that when you make these type of foams, the dominant factor in determining cost is the raw material. And natural rubber is substantially less than chloroprene rubber. We're actually about half the cost. So it was always our intention to put a material out there that would not only overcome all the environmental and health issues associated with neoprene, but provide a material that was functionally and from a performance standpoint the same or better, but it could be at the same price or less. The problem is that we worked with just at the time of introduction, one manufacturer. It was Patagonia's nominated manufacturer, and they controlled the pricing. We had nothing to do with the pricing. We sold the components or the raw materials, but they would in turn fix the price for the product. And their manufacturer really did not want to have the natural rubber compete with their neoprene products. So the Yulex material was always positioned at a 20 to 25 to 30% premium in the marketplace, but it didn't need to be. And so Decathlon early on recognized that they wanted to move away from neoprene because of the aforementioned issues associated with it. And so when they went to this one nominated manufacturer that Patagonia was using, they saw that they couldn't do that unless it was at a significant premium. So that was part of the impetus to go out there and develop, as Dr. Bui was talking about earlier, our own supply chain, because we could no longer work with a supply chain that was maybe exploiting.
Yeah, and if I can add to Thomas, with Decathlon too, I think it's very much aligned with sort of the Yulex mission with regards to the environment and also the social aspect of it. And so Decathlon is very inclusive. They have over 2,000 stores in 78 countries. And so that access is really necessary if you're really going to change environmental habits and products that affect the environment. And so although we love Patagonia, we love Finisterre, great companies, great ethos, their footprint is not the same as that of a behemoth like Decathlon. And so Decathlon's model of all for sports and sports for all is really a great mantra. And it speaks to access and inclusion, which are both themes that really Yulex, shares in and is aligned with.
This, you're leading Yulex now into a next step of its evolution. Just last month, I think you announced Yulex 2.0. Can you tell us about that a little bit more?
Yes, so Yulex 2.0 is the name that we've given to our independent supply chain. And that's really just to help people distinguish that from our previous supply chain that we were connected with that made Yulex foam. And as Jeff mentioned, that artificially set a price point that, and also a foam quality that we did not necessarily were equal participants or partners in. And so, when, during the pandemic, and then again, coincident or not, with when I moved from Viasite to Yulex, we decided to basically start our own supply chain and totally be in control of it, but develop partners who we would like to be, even friends or, collaborate with, people that we like to visit, people we want to work with, understanding and helping them and always bringing them value. So that's really important in the supply chain when people understand what Yulex does, they want to be our partners. But I'm very hesitant about bringing on new partners until I actually show value to the existing ones I've already committed to. And that's really important. And so what I think of our Yulex 2.0 is really, and I think Patagonia came up with this, is from seed to suit. Is their tagline, and that's what they use for the Yulex wetsuit. But it applies. So we basically are on the ground with the smallholders. Okay, we understand basically the smallholders who tap their trees, sell it to traders, sell it to the processors. We work intimately with the processors to transfer technology to make our different grades of natural rubber raw material products, such as Yulex Pure and other grades. Okay, and then understanding that basically everything from certification to EUDR compliance, we're working intimately, with the raw materials group, and then finding a distributor that is very familiar, for example, in Southeast Asia with rubber trading and commodities trading to help us sort of understand those markets. Basically, then purchasing and showing our value, those raw materials then to our authorized manufacturers of our Yulex products, such as Yulex foam and YULASTIC filaments. And then also connecting with OEM manufacturers and other tiers upstream, closer to the brands, with regards to making the yarns, the fabrics, the assembly of the wetsuits and the bags. And so understanding how each of those works.
Yeah, and that's how you also help your brand partners to come on board, because it's probably not easy for them to shift from non-sustainable, non-traceable sources to a sustainable plant-based alternative. In the old days, at Goa, we call that like conducting the value chain. Now we have to use a more friendly word, which would be maybe orchestrating, right? So orchestrating this whole supply chain with all the different instruments, all the different players, only if they play together the same symphony with a lot of training.
That's exactly right.
Then we can hear a beautiful sonate. But you don't stop there. So the future is already coming up with the launch of another product that we are hearing whispers about, and that's your YULASTIC filament. So going into the whole debate of elastane. I know there's a lot of people currently working on recycling of elastane, because that's one of the big problems of recycling blended fibers. But you now also have a solution. If you can maybe just briefly let us know what to expect here.
So thank you for that. So YULASTIC, which is the name of our natural filament, is a fine denier natural rubber filament that is 100% bio-based per the USDA Bio-Preferred Labeling Program. So that's very exciting. The applications for this fine denier are initially in 3 categories. It's in stretchable denim, socks, and elastics. And we've been working with a partner in Asia to develop all those applications over the past 18 months. So it actually is near commercialization. We're just sort of soft launching it and, working it out. Right now, we have a really special campaign out. It's called Socks Campaign, YULASTIC Socks. And so we'll be sending them to our many customers in apparel and footwear.
Wow, that was amazing. We're already at coming to the end. We have 2 things at the end related a little bit to ingredient branding. So we have this little tradition in the podcast where we are also asking you. Now you have been on a long journey. You've done so many things right when it comes to ingredient branding. Is there anything where you have a question, where you have a challenge or something that you would like to know about ingredient branding? Then now is your moment to address that.
Thomas, it's a very interesting question. We're starting to work with other ingredient brands. And so for now, we're looking at an ingredient brand in an ingredient brand that would then go through an OEM process to a consumer. So and of course, when we look at different markets, the concept of ingredient branding or the acceptance of the ingredient branding is different. For example, in wetsuits, companies come to us and insist or want to know how they can use the Yulex brand. Everybody that uses a wetsuit wants the Yulex branding on it. However, let's say in the footwear industry, the footwear brands are not keen to have your brand, like a Vibram or some of the other, or Ortholite, some of the other materials that are used. They're often not keen to put those on there. So anyway, the dilemma is how do ingredient brands, where there may be 2 or 3 different ingredient brands that are coming together to solve a problem, how do they position that to a consumer brand? And how is and there a dilution of one of the brands if there's 2 or 3 ingredient brands used? So that's an issue we're starting to address.
Very good point. I call that vertical ingredient branding or ingredient brand collaborations, and we see many of them happening. And I think I commented in one of the previous episodes also about it. That also has to do that historically the ingredient branding was very close to the finished product. If you think about Cordura or Gore-Tex or Primaloft, they were very much at the end of the process. There was maybe a garment manufacturer in between, and then they're relating to the brand. But now with sustainability, where, for example, already the waste is now becoming branded, and we all praise the term of collaboration. Everybody wants to collaborate with everyone. And I also see that some, if not many, of these ingredient brand collaborations are driven more by the fact of collaborating than by the fact of what does that actually mean for our brand. And I think if an ingredient brand is going into a brand collaboration with another ingredient brand, it needs to make sure that its brand promise is kept. And so you need to look at that finished product and saying, okay, what is this product now promising? To whom? And what is each contribution to that promise? And that needs to be clear. And if that's not clear, then you need to consider what would be the best strategy in such a collaboration. You have to stand very firm behind your brand promise, and you need to make sure that your brand promise is absolutely kept intact also when you go into a collaboration with other ingredient brands, and that you are also getting the fair value allocated to your brand back for that contribution that you are making. So that would be my answer to that question.
Good answer.
And obviously, talking about different industries and the acceptance of ingredient branding, but I think you and other ingredient brands that come from outside the category into those more difficult applications have a good chance to succeed. But you need to create a pull. There is no ingredient branding if you don't have an attractive story to tell, and if your narrative is not generating value with the clients of your brand partners.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a good point. Just one comment with respect to the value of the ingredient branding. When we approach, say, the automotive industry, and by the way, we are speaking with the automotive industry with regard to automobile interiors, the value of having Yulex as an ingredient brand known in many other industries, with Decathlon in the sporting goods industry and Patagonia and consumer products, that trust in the Yulex brand also translates into automotive. So when a consumer sees the Yulex brand, it's a trusted brand. It's the first branded natural rubber material in the marketplace. So that brings value to the automotive versus us going in there and having a 1% market share of their goods and trying to create some value with that new union. So we bring them a brand that has value, and it's already a known and stated value.
Absolutely. Great. So this brings me to my last point, and that is that we are asking always our guests if they would recommend someone to us to be invited into our podcast who could tell a fascinating ingredient brand story. Do you have somebody in mind where you would say that would be an ingredient brand story that we would also be interested in hearing more about?
Actually, I think an individual, and Jeff may not agree, or we haven't really talked
Okay.
about this, but his name is Rob Falcon, and he's basically a great innovator who has innovated and given rise to some very big ingredient brands. And I just think you would have a great conversation with him. He's interesting, he's bright, he's innovative, and he's touched on a number of different, he was involved with Ortholite, with Bloom. And so I think he might be an interesting person.
Wow, super.
Jeff, do you have any other?
I would throw in maybe Algenesis. So I think a really good guest would be Dr. Stephen Mayfield. And Stephen is the founder and CEO of Algenesis. And they are also an ingredient brand focused on algae and other plant-based oils to make totally bio-based, biodegradable thermoplastic polyurethanes.
Super. These are two excellent proposals. We will follow up with both of them and see if we can catch them and integrate. If you have contacts or you can introduce us, that would be also very much appreciated.
We can do both.
Super. So thank you. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Jeff, for sharing your experience and expertise on this important subject, which is still unknown to many of our listeners, and it should encourage many water sports enthusiasts and now also in other applications, people to look out for products made with Yulex.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was our pleasure being here.
This was the first episode of Season 2 of the Hero Inside Ingredient Branding Podcast. We kicked it off with Liz Bui and Jeff Martin from Yulex. Together, we discussed their journey of replacing neoprene with Yulex high-performing, plant-based, bio-based product and their expansion into new business areas. I think some of the key things we can take away from that discussion is the passion and the commitment of the company owners and management to actually move to the source of the feedstock and live there for 2 years to set up the entire raw material supply. And then from there, what we have learned is the orchestrating of the entire supply chain, carefully selecting every single partner, making sure that these partners work together well and that there is also good chemistry on a personal level between all the people being involved in the supply chain. And the third takeaway I would like to share is from the post-discussion we had with them when Liz said one of her true beliefs is really to be the change you want to see in the world. And I believe that Yulex is a fantastic example of what can be achieved if you follow your dreams. So please share your insights and questions for this episode on our brand LinkedIn page. Join the conversation. The link is also included in the show notes. Subscribe to the Hero Inside podcast to make sure you don't miss our upcoming episodes. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep being a hero on your journey to a better world.
This has been an episode of Hero Inside, the Ingredient Branding Podcast with Tomas Vucurevic. Each episode features stories and wisdom from game-changing creators and the shapers of the world's most exciting and influential ingredient brands. To learn more about ingredient branding and Tomas's work, visit brained.co. That's BRAIND.co. Until next time,